That's us recording now, Greg.
Hi, Craig. How are you?
I'm good. Who are you?
Good. Not too bad. Not too bad. Yeah.
Oh, you're looking well, and we're going to talk about sleep. And you've just told me what time you're going to bed, so I think that's why you're looking well. But just to let everyone know that we'll talk a bit about sleep, and you've been doing a lot of research and study on sleep, and been working on this. You put together some tips on it, but we'll kind of verge into a few other things, as we always do, go off on a bit of a controlled tangent about other areas of health as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what do you want to tell us about sleep?
So I think the main thing about sleep is that when people are thinking about health or talking about health, they might talk about exercise, they talk about eating a healthy diet, they talk about cutting down on alcohol, they talk about stopping smoking, they talk about reducing stress, but they don't often focus on sleep as much as experts like Matthew Walker, who wrote Why We Sleep, which I'll be referring to today, the ideas in that book. They don't really talk about sleep, and they should, because sleep actually is shown to affect, things that really make us really ill, and eventually you could die early. So it's that important. For example, cancers, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, mood problems. Sleep really does affect those things. So if you're lacking in sleep, and estimates vary, but it's between 60 and 80% of people are not getting a full night's sleep. So today I'd just like to talk about 12 tips that I've not just read about, but I've also implemented on my clients over the last 20 years. And these tips could help you get that essential full night's sleep. One thing that's maybe pertinent is people don't realize that if you're looking at the big rocks, this big rocks concept where it's usually productivity. And, if you focus on these most important things, rather than the little things, the big things move that needle health-wise. Usually it's used in a business sense about productivity. Perhaps perfecting your logo, for example, is not particularly important, but making a sales call is really important. And I think that sleep is definitely a big rock. That's what the research shows. So I think if you get a full night's sleep, it's particularly important for your immune system, for example. When they did experiments and they reduced people to 4 hours of sleep per night for 7 nights, it really, really impacted the immune system very significantly. I think it was about 40 to 50%. So it's really important to get enough sleep. And another thing they found was that even after a year, this is a little bit terrifying, even after a year, their immune systems were still different from the other group who were not deprived of the sleep. And incidentally, they were also given additional sleep afterwards. So after the 7 days, they were given a full night's sleep, and it still showed these effects on the immune system. So
we can't catch up on our repair.
Yeah, that's right, Craig. According to this research, you can catch up to an extent, but in this study, it simply showed that your immune system was still affected. So you really want to start getting a good night's sleep. As much as you can.
One of the things that we did say before we started this as well, this is not a scaremongering podcast, is it? This is share the facts, share the truth, and then give solutions of, right, well, how do you improve this? Because we are where we are now. For everyone, it's like, okay. Yeah. And both you and I have had two children. So we've had loads of nights of limited sleep, haven't we? And the odd late night from time and time again as well. So yeah, we're all in the same boat where we've had deprived sleep at some point, but all we can do now is start to make a difference from where we are.
Yeah, and I think that's why these 12 tips that we're going to run through can really help you to just move the needle. You're not going to get this perfect. It's like with anything, with diet, with exercise, you're simply not going to get it perfect. But hopefully some of these will help you get a better night's sleep. And I think a good quote that I like to use, I think it was Thoreau who said, and I think you could apply this to lots of health interventions, he said to affect the quality of the day is the highest of the arts. So it's not just about some ideas about your immune system or your risk of certain diseases or mortality. Like, how can we improve the quality of each and every day? And I think there's no question that if you get enough sleep, it's probably going to help you have a better day. I mean, Craig, just, we train people all the time. We put people under a bit of stress when we train people. And I've certainly found that if you have a well-rested client, they're different. The same person could be behaving differently, reacting differently, performing differently if they've not slept versus they have slept. Have you found that as well, Craig?
Absolutely, yeah. And with my own experience, when when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, I found when I first started, I was so worried I was going to get beat all the time that I was just hammering myself, and I was, I wasn't taking a balanced approach to it all. And then when I started focusing on recovery, still training hard and still pushing myself, really focusing on recovery, really focusing on sleep, I was like excited to go to the tournament at that point, rather than just broken down and wishing it was over and looking forward to a burger and a beer afterwards. That was so this, well, what you're saying about affecting the quality of the day, it gives you this energy, this enthusiasm for life, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, taking it right back to when I started as a trainer, that is why I became a personal trainer. It was to affect the quality of the day. I mean, the offshoots of, lifting weight or running fast or losing weight, that's kind of what does all that mean really, unless you're feeling better? You want the person to feel and be healthier. That's the goal. I mean, what was your motivation, Craig?
To make people feel better as well. Yeah, I started lifting weights when I was 15 or so, and I was just like, I feel great. I feel really, really good from doing this, from a teenager that was drinking, smoking, and all sorts of, and just eating rubbish. And I started lifting weights, and honestly, I just remember just all the fog lifting from the head, and I was like, I feel great. Like mentally, I feel so good. I want to share this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with me. Same story. I was working, I was working in an office. I wasn't exercising. I was smoking in the office. This was back in the day.
You are, yeah.
People are smoking in the office, 1987, smoking in the office. The woman across from me, she was an older woman who really heavy smoking, and in that way sometimes that she wanted me to smoke more to make her feel better. So I was smoking, feeling terrible.
Now people do that with coffee. I've got double espresso there. I'm having 6 of them a day. How many are you having?
Yeah. Actually, Craig, we'll not talk about your coffee use.
Right? I know. I tell you what, this lockdown has settled it right down.
So that's why I got into it. I started exercising and started eating better. Actually, I remember quite clearly. I also switched. I was drinking a lot of coffee, and I switched away from coffee, and that helped. That really did help after a period of readjustment, because you've got to watch it with the coffee. If you suddenly cut caffeine out, and this is quite well documented, people think it's kind of a really mild drug, but it's actually quite powerful. And people can get, if they cut it right out, they can get really quite bad withdrawal symptoms. What I get is I get extreme fatigue and a real flatness that's it's not that pleasant. So actually that's maybe a good place to start. Is the number one thing I ask my clients if they say they're not sleeping, and sometimes they do, and they particularly do when they're getting a little bit older. And there seems to be this link between sleep is maybe deteriorating a little bit anyway, and they say, I'm not sleeping well. And I'll say, okay, what's your caffeine intake like? And they will usually insist, oh, no, it's not that. I've always had X amount of caffeine. And I say, well, this might have changed. There's a body of research showing that, in fact, as you get older, it does affect you more. And certain groups are more prone to being affected, like women over 50 are more affected. It can worsen the symptoms of, at that stage of life, there's symptoms that, sleeplessness and temperature changes. And what they found was that caffeine intake was linked to a worsening of those symptoms. So what I do is, that I always like to do with clients, I always do an experimental approach. I'll say, okay, how many, let's go with this. How many coffees or teas are you having right now? Let's say they're having 6, okay? So why don't we just cut that back to, 5, 4, 3, and then bring it to before 12 o'clock. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll take a time point where if their mood is bad and their well-being is not good and they're getting those symptoms of feeling bad, we'll take a time point, say 2 p.m. Say, right, you text me at 2 p.m., text me your mood and motivation out of 10. That's the two things I tend to monitor, mood and motivation, because they seem to be quite strongly linked to overall well-being. Yeah. When you're feeling good, you usually feel motivated and your mood is good. Yeah. And what I've found is, and the interesting thing about caffeine is that even if you maintain you have had a good night's sleep, okay, they did sort of controlled experiments where they give caffeine to people, I don't remember the exact details, but it's 3 hours before bed, 6 hours, and 9 hours. What they found was that, and they monitored the subjective perception of sleep, but also the objective perception as well. What are the brains doing? What is their sleep structure? They found that even when people said, no, actually, when you give it 3 hours before, people say, I slept really badly. 6 hours before, they might say, no, I think I slept quite well, but their sleep structure is still altered. Yeah. So what I would say is that if you're having trouble sleeping, even if you didn't used to have a problem with caffeine, I would consider experimenting by just cutting it back. I did that with a client recently, actually, and it was quite remarkable, the difference. She really felt much, much better. So I would say that's the number one thing I ask.
One of the big rocks. That's a big rock.
It's a big rock. It's a big rock. I mean, I do know people who say, and I do know people. I've got this friend of mine, Fran, and she literally could have a double espresso just before bed and completely conk out. Yeah. But what the research seems to say is that even if you are actually conked out, your sleep structure, don't quote me, I think it's the deep sleep that's not as deep.
Yeah. Well, it's a stimulant, right? So it's just like if you were to have sugar before bed, you may fall asleep, but that sugar, something's got to happen with that sugar in the body. Something's happening with that caffeine. It's a stimulant for the brain and for the body, so it's stimulating it somehow, but you can still be asleep.
Yeah. Whilst
your body's still quite active, and again, it's maybe not taking you into that kind of deep, what is it? Is it the theta, beta, alpha, theta, maybe the delta brainwave when you go into sleep?
Yeah.
You out of that, so you're in more of a kind of lighter sleep. So, why would you take a stimulant before you want to sleep and repair and recover and get as deep as possible?
I mean, I would also say that some people, an interesting, an important thing occurred to me when I was actually listening to a guy who was researching caffeine and sleep. And he said, it struck me that when we showed that caffeine was overall beneficial for health, or coffee, he was researching coffee. Within that average benefit, there was lots of people who did not benefit. So the individual differences is really key. For example, me, if I have caffeine after 11 a.m. now, right, I will not sleep as well. And there was a guy actually in Portobello here, he sold the most amazing coffee. It's closed down now. The guy on the corner, can't remember what it's called. He sold this incredible coffee, and I had it at 8 in the morning, right? 8 in the morning. If I had that, I had to stop going to the guy. I felt bad because I was like, we didn't, because Greg's opened up across the road, and I started going to Greg's, but he could clearly see me going into Greg's, and I didn't have the heart to say, you know what it is, mate, your coffee is so strong. Yeah. It's so strong that I cannot sleep in the evening. So some people are really, I am super sensitive to caffeine, so it's an individual thing.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to it. I always have been, but I've built up some tolerance, which is interesting.
Have you really though, or?
Yeah, well, I remember I used to have 2 coffees a week, right? Maybe in my early 20s to mid 20s, I'd have 2 coffees a week, and it'd be a treat. I'd go and maybe have a breakfast somewhere, have a coffee, and almost like being this cafe, like all excited after the coffee, and just like having a real high. It was like I was having a few drinks and in a busy bar. I had that same kind of feeling. And then it got to the point of, especially after kids, 3 coffees a day, miserably knocked back and just grunting my way through the day. So, but now I tend to have a coffee in the morning after breakfast, and then maybe round about now I tend to have a green tea, and I kind of cap it. When I'm running about a lot and my energy's low, I'll fall into that. I'll grab a coffee. Maybe I'll grab a coffee at some point throughout the day. And I never appreciate it. I never enjoy the taste of it. It never feels good in the system afterwards. It's yeah.
It's it's
That's why it's
that.
a big rock. That's why it's a big rock, because it has its knock-on effect to loads of other things.
Yeah, I think also I think let's put it this way: if you're dealing with young children, do I believe that it makes me more patient? No. I don't think it does, because I mean it's making you sort of react quicker, isn't it? That's what you're reacting quicker. I have noticed if I have 2 coffees rather than 1, I can really only tolerate 1. If I have 2 rather than 1 in the evening, it's I would say that it's more difficult to deal with the children.
That point when when the caffeine's wearing out and your energy's kind of low and it's a hard time of the day.
Yeah,
no, it's totally true. Totally true.
So I mean that's caffeine. That's number 1. I would say number 2, which sometimes might be a surprise, is actually alcohol. And what I have found with alcohol is, this is what happened. I had suspected it. Everybody knows that, right? The idea is that the alcohol affects your nervous system, so that on the one level it's depressed, but on the other level your body's gearing up the other, to get to homeostasis. Like, why are my muscles relaxing like this? I've got to gear back up. So you kind of, 2 things are sort of going on at the same time. And then I read an alert that was sent out to Medscape, to US. It's a US system, but I think it's used by US doctors. And it was an alert saying, if you have insomniac patients, ask them about their alcohol intake, because they found now that there's an incredibly strong link between insomnia, poor sleep, and alcohol intake. And I would certainly say, and again, as you get older, I mean, look, we're not perfect. The other night we had a bottle of really nice wine, red wine.
But it was a really nice bottle, so it's fine.
That's right. It's not. It doesn't count. So we had this bottle of red wine the other night between the 2 of us, and we just slept so badly.
Yeah.
And you know what, Craig? It affected the next couple of days.
It affected the quality of the day, Greg.
Affected the quality of the day. Yeah. So what I just say is, consider if your day is really poor quality and you're drinking alcohol. I mean, it's, when you think about it, none of this stuff is really groundbreaking stuff, is it? No, it's really basic.
Yeah, but it's good awareness, because the first people might not be listening after this. You've taken away their caffeine and their alcohol, so they might just be talking to themselves at this point. But we kind of, it's all socially acceptable, the whole caffeine thing, isn't it? It's how we socialize, and there's lots of research saying that the coffee's good for you. Just like the red wine research that came out, the antioxidants in the grapes and red wine. So people, it's amazing how we trick ourselves to, well, it's good for us, got antioxidants. It's like, we'll just eat the grapes instead, because it's like you say, for everything that those grapes give you, all the sugar and all the alcohol and all the other stuff in the wine is like going to take that benefit away. Yeah. So we trick ourselves, and we can feel crappy throughout our day. We can feel rubbish, and a lot of time we're not honest with ourselves. And look, we do this for a living. We live and breathe this, and I know a lot of times I'm not honest with myself, because I just like that little crutch.
Yeah,
I like that little pick me up, or that kind of, it's all right. I look after myself lots of other ways, and you could just slip into bad habits. So it's really accumulative. When you start feeling rubbish, it's not just, very rarely is it just one big sudden hit. You're like, gosh, I went from feeling amazing to rubbish, unless you've had a big night out or something, your hangover. It just creeps upon you, doesn't it? And your energy's just getting zapped and zapped and zapped.
Yeah, I think also with, cards on the table, I do drink, but I just find that it's, even if you have a couple of drinks and then another couple of drinks the next day, what's happening is it seems your mood and your motivation is just gradually dropping. And that's your new normal. gradually dropping. And you just find yourself just feeling just a wee bit worse all the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it can be really enjoyable. We really enjoyed that the other night, and enjoyment's important. It's perhaps maybe that's why a certain amount of alcohol has sometimes been shown for some people to have some benefit, is that the element in which you're enjoying yourself. That's one of the mechanisms I can think of.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I always say that people who, if you're kind of dealing with quite a stressful life, quite a stressful job, or just a busy life, and then you go back and you have a glass of wine every night, that's going to catch up on you, right? So you've got to look at the other things. What exercise you doing? What you cooking yourself a meal, the sleep, obviously, meditation, yoga, all of this kind of stuff. But sometimes nothing beats a gin and tonic. Just sometimes, you just go back and it's like you almost feel the relaxation just kicking in with it, and it just enough to just alter your mind state and just help you let go of some of the stuff. Now, as long as that's not the habit, and that's just, tonight I'm going to have that. Yeah. So it's as always, it's just getting that right balance. It's kind of like we all know how we overload in sugar, how bad it really is for the body, but sometimes you're going to eat a cake or have an ice cream in the sun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for cakes. I made a carrot cake the other day, but I had to eventually freeze it.
Right.
My wife and I both put on like a kilo in 2 days. This cake that I said is too good. It's too tasty. No, but I agree. Balance is the key. Should we move on to exercise now and sleep?
Yeah. Interesting.
So, not that I've done this for a long time, but I know that when I do, it really affects my sleep, and it's not exercising enough. I've found with clients who are previously non-exercisers and then they start exercising, their sleep improves. It improves fairly quickly. So if you're not, exercising enough, and I'd like to define that, it'd be good to define it, but the average person in the UK is doing about 4,000 to 5,000 steps a day.
Right, yeah.
Which is really, have you got a pedometer, Craig? Have you got a pedometer?
I don't use a pedometer.
Don't use it.
But there was a period, because I'm walking a dog, twice a day, and I was like 15 to 18,000 per day.
Yeah. So that's
back actually, because I was needing more rest because I was also exercising and training on top of that. So
yeah, that's a fair bit actually. That's a fair bit. Actually, when they looked at the Amish, the Amish people, they sort of shun modern, many of the aspects of modern life, like I think cars and certain kinds of automatic machinery. So they kind of live in a way that would perhaps be more, natural. And what they found was they're doing about 19,000 steps a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be sort of what you would do, just live in a sort of more,
that's
natural.
Natural life. I was doing that 15 to 18,000. Then I was doing quite hard training on top of it, and then going in and training people and being quite active. And it's like, no, I need to actually get more rest, less output for me.
Yeah.
That's a complete. I live a very different lifestyle to most people. So
yeah. So, I mean, I would say that not getting enough exercise is pretty important. If you're not doing, I would say try and get yourself up to more than you're doing now. So I think you usually get these pedometers on your phone now. You don't have to pay more money, but just have a little look at that. And if you're not sleeping well, consider increasing the number of steps you do by a certain number each day. So let's say you're doing 4,000 a day, you might try and build up to 5,000 and so on and so forth. But another thing I found is strength training, whether it's lifting weights or lifting your body, body weight training. I've found that that's a bit like a sort of sleeping pill. If I do a heavy strength session, or even, I'm not saying using weights, just say you're doing press ups and squats and whatever, you do feel an almost overpowering urge to fall asleep if it's a hard session, a couple of hours later perhaps. So I would say that the reason for that is that growth hormone's released when you're asleep. The most of it's released when you're asleep. So getting enough exercise in and doing maybe strength training 2 or 3 times a week may also help with the sleep. So on the other hand, though, in fact, I'm quite a fan of, Tim Kennedy, who's a UFC he's a UFC fighter, and funnily enough, I just found out recently that he's a UFC fighter. I think is he quite highly ranked UFC fighter, Craig?
He was, yeah, he's retired now, but yeah, he was. He was one of the top guys. Yeah, he was
So
a
he was good.
military guy as well, isn't he?
He's a what? Sorry, yeah, he's a at that time. So he was doing these fights, and he was also a Green Beret. So he was a special forces guy who was doing these fights, and he was going back over. So he said something interesting. He said, and I'm not saying entirely, you have to interpret this correctly. He said, when you go to bed, you should be totally exhausted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm training quite a lot now, because I'm lucky to have the place at home and things like that. And when I go to bed, I just conk out immediately. I really do. So being tired enough is really important.
And so what I would say to that is that's okay as long as you're not waking up exhausted.
Yeah.
So there's your kind of barometer there. That's what to check in. You go to, you do live your life, do your day, and do it properly, and then get to bed. If you're going to bed at the right time, you go, I'm exhausted. It's like, you've probably been really productive. You've probably been exercising. You've probably been giving lots to your family or whatever it is you're doing. Then you should, if you go to bed at the right time, you wake up at the right time. Then, after a few minutes of feeling a bit groggy and getting your water in you or whatever it is, you should be up for that day. So if you're not, and you're like, oh, it's maybe this, maybe you're just trashing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I would say, I absolutely agree with that. It is possible to be overdoing it so much that it affects your sleep. And I've definitely suffered from that too. I've had it where if you're overtraining, I will wake up. I'll have difficulty falling asleep. I'll wake up and I'll wake up earlier. So it is possible to overdo it. I'm not sure how widespread a problem that is, though.
Very, very few people are. But I almost take exercise aside there. If you are just going to your bed exhausted and you're waking up exhausted, I suppose it's right. Go back to the caffeine, alcohol, nutrition, stress. Or start looking at all of that, because you're maybe just depleting yourself through all of that side of things. And actually flip that around and do all the exercise, and you'll be totally fine in it again.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If you're burning the candle at both ends and you're training really hard, it's possible you're going to.
Or even without the training is what I mean. Some people still just completely waste themselves and zap themselves through all of that side of things. Too much stress, too much alcohol, being too busy, all of that kind of thing.
Absolutely,
very little exercise, fall asleep exhausted, wake up exhausted, and not going to bed at the right time as well. That's probably something you'll touch on.
Yeah. Well, actually, on that point though, something I've found very useful. I used to believe that if you were getting everything right, you would feel great every day. You're going to feel great every day, okay? And the guy, there's a Professor David Burns, who's a guy who very sort of eminent American psychiatrist and psychotherapist. He said something that was very useful to me. He said, look, even if you're, happy and well, you can only really hope for maybe 5 days out of 7 when you're feeling great.
Yeah, totally.
So
that's a good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
No, I'm just, I agree with you. And that is a good week. So don't expect to be springing up and, clicking your heels together as soon as you wake up in the morning. No, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you something else that helped me on that point. I think it's a good point. I used to think if you're healthy, you're training, you're eating correctly, that your life's, going to be just fantastic all the time, right? And there's a great method it comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, and particularly David Burns's. And if you have a belief, my belief that was making me feel bad was I should feel brilliant in the morning every day, right? Yeah. Now, I mean, maybe you're listening to that going, but that's ridiculous. But it wasn't to me. I really believed that. So if I woke up and didn't feel great, I was like, oh, there's something wrong. I'm not normal. What's wrong with you? So the method you use, or I used in that case, was called the survey method. What you do is to test your belief and prove if it's true or untrue, you call up 5 people you know and trust, and you say, hey, look, I think you should feel great every day in the morning, right? How do you feel in the morning? And people go, I just got this litany of, oh God, I feel absolutely awful for about an hour, and and then
I've had my 3 coffees. Then I feel great.
I know. But what was really interesting, the reason it's so powerful is because it's very, very interactive with other humans that you know. Yeah. So the belief instantly changed. And funnily enough, I did that maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And this morning, my wife, Annalie, she was like, I'm not feeling good, And I said, you know what? It's interesting that ever since I've done that thing, the survey method with the 5 friends, when I wake up and I don't feel fantastic, my mind immediately goes, yeah, but you can't expect to.
Yeah. Good point.
So I think next one here is exercising too hard near bed. That affects your sleep. So, I mean, do you ever do that, Craig? Did you not used to do your training in the evening, or?
So this was something I wanted to bring up when you were talking about exercise. I wondered if you were going to bring this up. So there was 2 things. And when you put me on to the whole Ayurvedic lifestyle as well, I really started looking and going, this training really hard, really late is, they're saying it's not great. And I've never felt great from it. So I used to do jiu-jitsu in the evening, and more when I was kind of training a lot harder as well. So it would be quite hard sessions. That could be anything. Sometimes there was a 6 till 7:15 class, or sometimes it was like 8:15 to 9:30. I was wired. I could not sleep. Now, part of it is again, you're sparring, you're finishing your session off with a bit of a toy fight, but it can get quite intense at times, right? So just to wind down from that, it's really, really difficult. So I really felt it in my sleep. But also when I was doing a lot of strength training, things like deadlifts and squats and the big, heavy lifts, I felt really kind of quite stimulated from them as well for quite a while. So I cut all that out. I always tried to do my jiu-jitsu or my strength morning or kind of lunchtime. Now, and I'll do it a little bit later on sometimes, but in the evening I would generally only do yoga or meditation.
Yeah. I mean, what I would also say is, what I've found recently is with the boys, trying to get them to sleep, is that a 1 kilometer walk, a 10-minute walk, a 15-minute walk, that can really, because I don't know if you use sleep tracking, but we've got this sounds a bit, we've got sleep tracking for the boys just because we bought them Fitbits, so we get sent information about their sleep.
You chipped them as well.
What was that?
Have you chipped them?
That's a good idea. No, but we get the sleep reports. Not that I obsessively look at those every morning or anything like that. But there's a point about that, about being a data junkie. So bookmark that actually. We've found that if they have an evening walk, they fall asleep quicker and they tend to sleep deeper. They get less disturbed sleep.
But so that's different than intense exercise, isn't it? That's a bit of movement's so vital.
Yeah, I think that walking's kind of a balancing activity, isn't it? But it balances you out. It takes away the inertia, gets you moving a bit, but without that stimulation of the harder exercise, obviously jiu-jitsu, lifting weights, or if you're doing running, used to also make me too near bed, used to make me stimulated, and really hard running. And the harder the intensity, if I did a set of intervals at 6 p.m., my heart would be pounding when I would fall asleep. Actually, just to that point, important point about data, or even about your sleep, we alluded to it earlier. You can't get too obsessed with it. You can't do that. When I was talking to Nick Littlehales, I consulted with Nick Littlehales, who was Manchester United's sleep coach for a while. He's written a book called Sleep, basically. But he talks in the book about how he would go to their houses, look at their houses. He'd be checking for cappuccino machines. He'd be checking for electronics with little glowing lights in the room. They'd check for temperature and all that kind of stuff. I'd be monitoring their sleep. But he said we wouldn't really share it with them day by day, because they might go, oh no, I've not slept well. Oh, and I'm not going to perform well because I've not slept well. So I think sometimes you've got to be a little bit careful about getting too obsessed with all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Now the next thing is, this one is maybe people don't know. This is one that people usually really don't know. Okay, and this is about additives. Additives. Okay, now I personally have got a real stake in this one. And I thought Annalie, she's kind of genetically different. I thought she was impervious to stuff, But monosodium glutamate, if I have a bag of crisps that's E621, if I have a bag of crisps in the day, at any time of day, or I have perhaps those noodles, I don't really eat that kind of thing now, little noodles you would have as a student that are a little pack with them. Can't remember what they're called. Like, I think the Americans called them ramen noodles. It's like in a pack, it's a cheap thing. It's got the E621. If I eat that, I will literally, people exaggerate about how little they sleep. I will literally not sleep the entire night. It's got an incredibly powerful impact, and served with clients many times.
What else will you find that in then, Greg?
So you usually find it in crisps, but what they've done is, in some countries, it's banned. It's banned now. So there's other effects it can have, like stiff neck and palpitations and so on and so forth. You find it it's mainly crisps and mainly in Chinese food. You'll often find it in Chinese food. They don't all cook with it in takeaways. Sometimes they used to, and often you will see outside the restaurant, no MSG.
Yeah.
Because it's known for that. It's not exclusive to that. Other people use it, but that's where it tends to be.
And then, so what about things like kind of bottled soy sauce and stuff that you'll buy, or a teriyaki sauce to put in with your healthy stuff, right?
Well, the thing is, the interesting thing is that, and that's another related point, you can find it in sauces as well. Mm-hmm. You will find it there. Recently, we had a situation where we got, now was it a soy sauce or was it another sauce? Can't remember, but both suddenly slept really badly. Checked the label, no E621. Then Annalie, in fact, I didn't check it, she checked it. There was no E621. Looked again, and it was another related one. It must be a related family of chemicals. And I think, don't quote me, it was E631. They seem to be in the 6 numbers. There's this stimulating effect of these chemicals. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's more powerful at keeping me awake than any of the other stuff. But some people are completely impervious to it. Most people don't even realize it's in there. I think there's one brand of crisps that has it. I can't remember. It may be, but I noticed they're phasing it out. They're obviously phasing it out. And one of the ways you know that it's in there, apart from reading the label, is it's like a super salt. It makes everything taste incredibly good and moreish. It's got a slightly addictive quality as well. So if you maybe find like, oh my God, I'm addicted to salt and vinegar crisps of some brand, check the label, E621.
Once you pop, you can't stop. They
there you go.
Exactly what they were doing with that, didn't they?
I think they used to have it in it, but they've taken it out now. Procter & Gamble. It's Procter & Gamble who make. It's right. Procter & Gamble, the chemical company who make.
England, is it?
Yeah. So that I'd watch out for that. So that's a matter of trial and error, isn't it? You just eliminate it, but most people don't even realize it's there. So you check the labels.
To look for it, yeah. It's known to look for it.
Because lots of people don't read. I mean, they don't actually read labels at all. But maybe on a related point. Maybe that's on the next point actually. Just about eating too much before bed. Yeah. We recently had a delicious couple of meals with a jalfrezi, chicken jalfrezi, and we also had a Thai green chicken curry. And we took a sauce that was out of a paste that was out of a jar, a green Thai paste. It was absolutely delicious, but I think it was just too spicy. Too flavoursome. There's too much salt, too much ginger as well. I'm not sure there was sugar, but it's just too much, and it stimulates it seems to make what monosodium glutamate does and salt does, it increases your blood pressure, so you can feel it pounding in your ears. So that's another one people might not know. The thing is with eating too late is, what they found is that eating too late affects your circadian rhythm. Your body kind of jumps to a different rhythm. So if you eat late, your body thinks it's kind of earlier in the day, so your sleep onset will be delayed. But another thing that I wanted to discuss, I don't know if you've experienced this, this latest trend for intermittent fasting, trend now for intermittent fasting. Whenever I try that, if I even bring my last meal back to say 4 p.m, I will not sleep a wink. So some people need to, and this is what I've read a little bit about this too, is that some people, I don't know whether I need to adapt for longer and whatever, but it's pretty unpleasant. So if you're not eating enough prior to bed, that can affect people too. Have you any experience of this, Craig?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm of that kind of body type where, if it goes out of balance, I'll lose weight, you know, and not in a way that kind of is really, really healthy. I'll go underweight again. When I was competing and overtraining, I was always underweight when I stood on the scales ready to compete. And if my health is going, I kind of will lose weight very quickly. I'm just, things burn fast with my body type. Yeah, kind of nervous system metabolism is very active, so I have to be careful with that. But so before, when I tried the fasting, I found it really, really hard, and again, didn't affect the quality of my day in a good way. And this was after trying it for a wee while. But then I went to time restricted eating, which I suppose you're kind of talking about here, where I would just get up. You know, we tend to have breakfast about 7:30 anyway, so to have my breakfast 7:38, and very rarely will I eat past 6 o'clock. But I've eaten the food that I need between 8 and 6 that day, and if I eat later on, I feel it. I don't feel as good. Sometimes I get away with it, right? Sometimes it's fine because I don't do it that often, but generally that's a good rule for me. Finish 6, 7 at the latest. That's good for me. So I'll go from kind of 7:30 to, say, even just a 12-hour window there. But having, you know, if I generally go to bed round about 10, maybe just a wee bit after that sometimes, then give myself 3-4 hours with not taking in any food. I feel that's worked for me. And that's been a lot of trial and error. But I have to have eaten enough throughout the day.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think we were a similar body type, because I mean, that's the other thing in the mix here, isn't it? That is the different. That's coming up again and again here. Different body types, different constitutions react differently to all this stuff, and that's why I'm such a fan of an experimental approach. Yeah. You could spout all the research you like that works for other people, but it might not work for you, and you might be complete opposite of what the research says. And I think
sorry.
No, go on.
Well, also just being careful of this whole thing about how couples eat the same diet. We're really lucky. Emma and I respond exactly the same way to pretty much everything physically. You know, we've got that same body type. The kids have got our body type, so we can all eat the same diet. But if you've got someone who's, you know, a couple that are very, very different, but you're eating the same diet at the same time, one might feel okay, one might feel terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, there was something else I meant to say about that. Oh, yeah, it's another sort of intake thing that's pretty simple, actually. And I've found myself not obeying this rule. And there's no benefit to me, really, from not obeying this rule. It's not particularly beneficial to drink too much fluid before bed, drinking too much fluid before bed. You know, I just sort of occasionally do say, I'll have a glass of water, and it's a little bit too much fluid, and then it'll interrupt your sleep. And what they do know is that broken sleep, even if it's the same amount of sleep, is not as good for your well-being and your health and your mood as if you break it up. So even if you get 2 4-hour chunks separated by getting up to the toilet, it's not as good as the 8 hours of continuous sleep. It's a pretty simple one, that. I mean, just Anley would, you know, she can handle it better than me. Back to the couples thing, she would say, hey, Greg, do you want to have a barley cup? I have a barley cup is this sort of old school coffee replacement with no caffeine. So I'll have that barley cup, you know, sort of to keep her company too, you know, because in couples, like, you don't want to say no because you're like, oh, you're not keeping me company, you know what I mean? So I'll have a barley cup, you know, and then I have it, and like I'm waking up and going to the toilet in the night. So that's one you don't see too much of, but that's a useful one. Another one is that Nick Littlehills, the Man United sleep coach, talked about a lot, was the sleeping environment. That was really important. And obviously a dark room, if possible. So get the blackout blinds. A room that's not too warm. That's super important. And a room that doesn't have lots of little glowing lights, even the tiny little lights glowing on, say, a phone charger or a socket. What they found was that really can affect your sleep. That's really important. But another interesting point for me, who's asthmatic, I'm actually asthmatic. I was intrigued. He was the sleep guy for the Sky cycling team, right? And what they would do is every night they would, as they travel around, their sheets and their duvets and all that would be fresh every night. Yeah. Because the little tiny amounts of dust and so on and so forth can affect sleep. And one thing I've found an incredibly strong link between is cleaning getting the sheets, the duvets, and also vacuuming the floor. Anley and I often comment, and it's not a placebo effect. Like, I seem to have slept better last night.
Yeah.
So watch out if you've got asthma. Maybe even if you don't have any asthma like me, and because Anley doesn't have asthma, those little bits of dust can just, maybe your breathing's not as clear. It's just you wake up fuzzy-headed. So that's one that I don't often see, but I would consider
we
that.
really noticed that because Emma's got asthma and she can get bad allergies. She's sometimes, again, if she's got all these things in check, then her allergies are fine and asthma doesn't bother her. If not, she can feel a bit aggravated by it. But the dust under the bed, for instance, things like that, and the changing of the sheets, and always, it's the first thing I kind of make myself do now when I get up. Kind of dust, can wipe down the bed and make the bed properly. There's something about it mentally for me. It's like, that's me committing to my day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be lazy today. That's me committing to start my day properly, but it's also a cleanliness thing. That's an old thing. That's an old Islamic rule that they follow as well, isn't it? They always believe that you get rid of the bugs and the dust and stuff, and
I didn't know that,
for your general well-being. I can't remember. Yeah, I read about that, and that's just one of those, one of those rituals that they follow. Every religion's got these rituals, and there's definitely something in that.
That makes sense. I mean, I had a guy, he had terrible asthma. This guy I know, Phil, and he had terrible asthma. And I said, how often are you changing your pillows and your duvet? Because I change mine every 6 months. What I do is when I buy it, I get a marker pen and I write on the duvet and the pillow when it was bought. What's quite interesting is that sometimes you'll pull out, you got these pillows in circulation, you pull it out, you go, oh my God, I found one from 2017. Yeah. Right, okay. So that can really help. And Phil, he was really strong. When you talk to him, he's like, and I said, you're not changing your, how long have you had your mattress and your duvet and your pillow? And years. And then, I got a text a couple of months later saying, Greg, it's amazing. I got rid of all that stuff and I'm breathing so much better. Because if you're allergic to or it's sensitive to, or actually allergic to, I think it's an actual allergy. I have an actual allergy to house dust mites. It's full-on allergy. A very small amount of them can cause sensitivity, and the areas of your home that have the huge concentration of house dust mites is your bed, your mattress, your pillows, your bed. I've actually got the you get them from John Lewis. You get the anti-allergy covers to go over your mattress, your duvet cover, and your pillows as well. And that was huge for me, not just from a sleep perspective, just from a general sort of well-being perspective.
Yeah. Can I just say one of the things that Emma's been doing recently as well, is she got one of these nose strips so that she was nasal breathing throughout our whole sleep. She used to wake up at some point through it. She's just been doing it for about a month or 6 weeks maybe. And she would always kind of wake up and her asthma would be bothering her a little bit, and there'd be just a wee bit aggravated. Since she's been kind of using these nose strips, I can't remember her waking up. And she's been saying that she's been sleeping kind of straight through, or she has actually said a couple of times she has woken up, but she just goes back to just doing a little bit of nasal breathing and she just conks straight back off, rather than starting to get aggravated by allergies or whatever if that wakes her up. So,
I mean, the thing is about the nose is that nose, it's a big Ayurvedic thing that the nose breathing is, for the nervous system, but also the nose contains a sort of filter, a filtering system as well. But I also found that in the morning, I have to fold the bed covers back. If you make the bed, you kind of make the ideal and get the pillows away from where they were, because the house dust mites will, if it's a problem with house dust mites, they love that. They love that going back over because it's all wet and warm and they multiply. So I find that if I actually, say you've made the bed, say you've got people round and you've got to make the bed and you put the pillows where they were overnight, we found that I will get an increase in the slight wheezing as well. So I have to fold that back. One of the things that I've not really thought about too much personally is the time you go to bed and the time you get up, because I naturally get up quite early. I don't have to set an alarm. I will get up between like 4 and like 5:30 naturally. But most of the sleep experts say that you should go to bed and get up at the same time every day. But what I found is that if you get up late, I don't know if you found this with your, I've certainly found it with the boys. If they get up late, they will tend to fall asleep later as well. So there has to be a period where you just have to take it on the chin, and you have to get up earlier. And then what that will do is bring the time you go to sleep back. I've noticed it particularly with Jack. We're in this late sleep cycle at the moment. And this morning he got up at like 20 past 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
But you look at the sleep app and you see that he's not falling asleep. I said something silly to him like, Jack, just do what you like, stay up till whenever. And he did it. I did it. He went, you told me. I didn't mean it though, you know. So you got to watch that. I find we go to bed at the moment, maybe because of all the light we're getting. We're outside in the garden. We're getting all the light. That's another related point, isn't it? That the earlier in the day you get the light, and the more light you get, the more that tends to settle your circadian rhythm down. So we're just finding we'll go to sleep at 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we're getting up, on the whole, a lot earlier. What's your experience?
Can I just say that people will be thinking that's what time your kids are going to bed. That's what time Greg's going to bed. That's why he's looking so fresh. What?
It's because I'm getting up early. I don't know.
It's interesting though, because I mean that's an Ayurvedic thing as well, isn't it? Naturally, you the circadian rhythms, everything's slowing down at that point, and then I bet everyone has experienced it at 8, 9 o'clock when you're watching telly and you feel like you could just doze off. I bet there are thousands of people that do have that little doze off nap for 20, 30 minutes, wake up, rewind it and watch the rest of their Netflix program, try and go to bed at 11, 11:30 and they just can't sleep.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean,
that's a really common thing for people, I think.
I think it is. You just start to gear back up as you go up nearer 12 o'clock.
I'm not prepared to, especially you just get the kids out of bed. You finally got a couple of hours of freedom. I couldn't go to bed that early. I kind of sometimes just stay up for the other night. I was so bored with this lockdown thing. You kind of go in the peaks and the It's like I just want to sit up and watch rubbish telly just for the sake of it. So maybe I'll get there one day with the discipline of 8:30, 9 o'clock.
I mean, I'll tell you though, I'll be honest, it's not even discipline. We're conking out because we went through this cycle of getting up earlier. It's just naturally brought our sleep, back a little bit.
Just go with it.
Yeah, basically. So actually, that's actually pretty much all the tips that I had on sleep. That's the gleanings that I've got from my reading with my clients and from my personal experience as well. Have you got anything you want to add?
Well, I was going to ask you about yours. I mean, you've covered so much there. We've kind of gone off into a few other things. Is it a kind of priority order of the way you listed it, or is it a case of going, whatever 2 you can really address or 3 you can really address first, just work with them and then see if you can add the others? Or would you say go caffeine and alcohol first?
I think you need
caffeine, alcohol, exercise, didn't you? That was like
I mean, I suppose if I was with a client, and they're exercising already, right? They're exercising not too much, they're just exercising enough. I wouldn't be tackling that, except so when you're with a client, you can actually sort of what's the word? You can do a little assessment, can't you? You can assess what's going on. Like you say, listen, are you drinking? Sometimes you talk to a person and go, hey, you're drinking too much coffee. Don't drink coffee. Don't drink tea. You're having too much alcohol. Don't drink alcohol. So I think when you look through these all, just to run through, you've got your caffeine, your alcohol, not enough exercise, too much exercise, your additives, your timing of the light, your eating out, your fluids. One final thing, actually, Craig, that I've forgotten to mention is about stress and perhaps negative thinking when you're asleep, when you're lying there and you can't sleep. So what Matthew Walker sort of advises is that don't just keep lying there for ages worrying. Get up and do something relaxing and then go back to bed. Don't lie there for the whole time. One thing I've found can help is, I suppose it's your area of expertise, it's the mindfulness. I've found that if I'm having some recurring ruminating thought about, oh no, I'm not going to get to sleep, oh God, tomorrow's going to be terrible, oh no, what about all this sleep stuff and how important it is? This is awful. If I don't get a night's sleep, my life's ruined. And what I do is the breathing, mindfulness of breathing. Just bring the attention back to the breathing, in and out through the nose or in the belly. Of course, then the thoughts will start again. Oh no, what about tomorrow? And then more often than not, I will fall asleep.
Counting sheep, eh? It's kind of what you're doing. But one of the, interesting you say that, because one of the, we run these mindful based living courses, and generally it's people who have had very little or no mindfulness experience or practice, or like say very little experience. Take them to an 8-week course, mindful based living course, teach them the fundamentals in the first 4 weeks, mindfulness of breathing, body scans. And it's amazing, after say week 3, week 4, people go, I'm sleeping so much better because I'm using the body scan when I wake up at night. Wake up at night, mind starts going, and it's like, okay, start working on my breath and direct it down to my feet and then to my ankles and then say, normally by the time I'm at my thighs, I'm off again, And it's probably, should get the stats on this. Going to start measuring this with every course, but it is, anecdotally, it's the most common thing that's said to me.
Is it really? So the people
in those first few weeks, because so many people struggle with sleep, and one of those things that the people, it's a tool that people are using, and it's making, and again, because that they remember it and they want to come back and tell you, because it has such a quality, an impact on the quality of the following day, doesn't it?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's I found it useful, particularly for sleep. And I also listened to a body scan, a 10-minute body scan, and that can really. I mean, I almost whatever time of day I listen to that body scan, I will conk out. Which of course you're not meant to do, are you? You're not really meant to fall asleep, are you?
There's no right or wrong, Greg.
All right. Oh no, I'm falling asleep.
Stop judging yourself.
I'm falling asleep. And I suppose, so that's about it. One thing they have found, and you can fill me in on this, Craig, is that cognitive behavioral therapy can be effective for insomnia. But what you're telling me, and it seems correct from our experience and your vast knowledge of mindfulness, that mindfulness training can also help you sleep better.
Yeah, and I'd almost kind of go, mindfulness, absolutely. And I think CBT, I think counselling, I think anything where you're being able to settle the mind and still the mind and become a bit more kind of open, calm, clear, steady, in the mind. Of course, that's going to affect you, isn't it? And because a lot of times we lie down to go to sleep with our worries, if we've not managed to kind of train the mind to not keep feeding those stories. It's almost like it's a pattern in the brain that we do, isn't it? We just go to them and we go over and over. Any of this kind of training of the mind helps us realize, I'm just getting myself caught up in all these imaginary stories again. And we'll probably have some techniques, that your counselor, your psychotherapist, CBT, mindfulness practitioner has worked with. But one of the things where, over the past few years, my development's kind of gone with the mindfulness, it's kind of going back full circle to how I started, because I started more with the body scans, the movement-based meditations and practices, and then went into like yoga and Kundalini yoga, and I was always doing bits of mindfulness then, but then we went really formal into my mindfulness training, kind of teaching that, still use that, and still really, really love it. But what I've realized is that I make my mindfulness for my clients and for myself more somatic, more body-based practices, more about using the breath to wind down the nervous system, using a lot of things like polyvagal tuning. So just how to kind of wind down the nervous system and then tune up the vagal nerve, the vagus nerve, which is all that kind of balancing act, isn't it? So a lot of sighs, a lot of deep kind of sighing, a lot of releasing of the eyes, stretching the eyes, rubbing around the eyes, just kind of breathing into the jawline and the neck and the arms and stretching out the hands and releasing that grip and opening the kind of chest and the rib cage with the breath. So really going into mechanics of breathing, sensations of breathing, winding the nervous system down. In the vagal tuning, they then go into, after you've wound the nervous system right down, they go into things like humming and chanting, because that's very soothing for the nervous system. Smiles, big Cheshire kind of cat grins, And so these things that kind of tone up the balance in the body, and kind of tune you into to feeling good and feeling positive.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing about adopting a good posture. It's amazing what you can do just by changing your posture, and how that can make you feel differently. So that's where I've gone with my practice. It's more into the somatic and more into the body based practices, because if we've not had formal training and we get too caught up in mindfulness, we get too caught up in trying to watch the thoughts and bring them back, and caught up in I shouldn't be doing this. And that's why you need kind of formal training, how to do it properly, and know how to just drop your awareness into your body.
Got you. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Because mindfulness of the breath is one of the ones that they start with usually in mindfulness training. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's your basic mindfulness of breathing, settling the mind. Using the breath to bring the mind back. So yeah, absolutely. I think you have to. If someone wanted to run a marathon, Greg, you wouldn't have them running the marathon, would you? You would, if they're only walking, if all they do is walk 3,000 steps, they go, my end goal is a marathon. It's like, maybe they just get you up to being able to walk 7,000 steps comfortably first, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So it's that same kind of thing when we first start mindfulness as well. It's we close our eyes, someone rings a bell, we go to meditate, and we realize our mind is jumping around all over the place. It's right, I need something to bring this back. Let's come back to breath. Start regulating our breath, and every time the mind wanders off, it gives us something to hook back onto. So that's kind of one of the key things there. But as we know, when we can start to regulate our breathing, we can completely change our physical state, can't we, by how we breathe. So learning how to take those deep regulated breaths will also wind the nervous system down. If there's agitation in the body, the mind's not going to be able to settle that much. The body's a bit just breathing's tight, I've got a niggle on my shoulder, this chair's not comfortable, it's the mind's not just going to go, oh, it's fine, it's cool. The mind tends to follow the body. So that's why I like to just wind the body down first. And then that just kind of gives less to aggravate the mind. So the mind can then notice our thoughts arising, all that sounds, and so I've got caught up in thinking. There's just a bit more space for all that stuff to arise and for you to notice it.
So could you say that the body and the mind are they somewhat mirroring each other? Are they mirroring each other? So if you relax your body, then your mind will tend to relax, and vice versa? Or does it come from the body
I
to the
think
mind
it's
only?
hard to relax going the other way. I think you could. You definitely could, but it's a harder road to it. It's that whole thing about the kind of Buddhist monks that will sit cross-legged on the hard floor and sit in complete stillness until they achieve peace. And then probably the body will kind of end up winding down there. But it's like, well, let's do it in 20 minutes or 10 minutes by winding the body right down, and then going, you suddenly realize you can lie there pretty comfortably, and the mind's rested. So I think it's a long, harder road, and you need more patience and more time to use the mind to wind down the body. Wind down.
Got you.
Because again, it's this whole thing that the kind of nervous system and the hormonal systems can really control how we feel and how we think, isn't it? The activity of the mind and everything. So there is that. Again, certain breathing techniques and patterns can really take you down the brain waves again, isn't it? And take you into that kind of more alpha and theta brain waves, which will have this relaxing effect on the body for sure. But really, we're using the body to do that if you're working with rhythmic breathing and flowing breath and stuff. So that's what I would say. And again, the people that I have studied under and worked with, whose work I really take to, they are doing that. They are doing so. And people's minds are busy. We're overstimulated. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stress, and and especially if someone's going, all right, I'll try this meditation thing, but I'm not doing more than 10 minutes per day because I'm not going to stick to it. And I find it quite difficult. Sit down in silence for 10 minutes and see how smooth a practice that is. It's not going to go that smoothly. People are going to give up. So why don't we give them some techniques that just relax the body and go, actually, yeah, feel a bit better now. So
that makes sense. It's a faster track than just sitting there, basically.
And what did we say as well at the start? Is like we started exercise and started training, and we both felt so good mentally.
Yeah.
We impacted the body to affect the day and affect how we feel.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose just to summarize back to your point about which one should you start with. I mean, it's very variable, isn't it? I think, I think it was Roger Bannister who said that he saw sort of sport and athletics as a way of determining what you were like, what your body was, how it worked, and so on. So I think you have to have that experimental approach to see what works best for you, whether it's caffeine or alcohol, or it's exercising earlier in the day rather than later in the day, changing the time you eat and so on. But I think it's worth doing, particularly for sleep. I think that it's worth trying a few of these because I think a small amount of effort can produce, in my experience with clients and personally, a large amount of change just in the quality of the day, I think another good quote that I came across that really struck me was, and it was, how we live our days is how we live our lives. We live our lives day by day, so you can work on this day here. People tend to see their lives as a sort of large, huge thing, but really it's lived day by day. So if you can go to bed a bit earlier or cut down the caffeine or whatever and just make the next day a bit better, that is, your life is composed of days. So that was a sort of, that was helpful to me. Let's just make this day a good day and make tomorrow a good day. Or,
so And for people who maybe are going, well, there's a lot of things that are way out of balance, I think the encouraging thing is one or two small changes can then make a big difference, isn't it? Yeah. It's like the person who's never exercised and they go for 4 walks that week and they've never exercised. Like the impact that that's having on them is huge. So just and so do it bit by bit, but you can have a big impact. You can make a big percentage gain quickly if you're not doing much of this and you start doing some of it, can't you?
Yeah. And what I'll do is, Craig, I'll forward you that. And I did a blog on this, so I'll forward that to you. So if people want to just have a recap, then they can have a look at that.
Perfect. Great. Cheers, Craig.
Cool. And
we'll have to get on and do some more because as always, we went down a few rabbit holes and there was quite a lot we could have discussed. So and people are really interested in how they can impact their health and their immune system just now, obviously, with everything that's going on. So we'll do another one soon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me on. Thanks a lot.